In the final decade of the 19th century, the world was learning to speak a new language, not with words, but with waves. And no one understood its grammar better than Nikola Tesla. While others saw electricity as a tool for lighting streets or powering motors, Tesla saw it as a cosmic medium, a bridge between minds, continents, and even planets. His laboratory on South Fifth Avenue in New York became a cathedral of this new faith, where copper coils sang with high-frequency currents and glass tubes glowed without wires. This was not magic. It was mathematics made visible. And it was the foundation of everything that would come and everything that would be stolen. By 1890, Tesla had already conquered the war of currents. His alternating current system powered the Chicago World's Fair and Niagara Falls, but his mind had already leapt beyond wires. He believed the Earth itself was a conductor, and the upper atmosphere a reflective layer. If you pulsed electrical energy into the ground at the right frequency, it would create standing waves, resonant vibrations that could circle the globe and return to their origin. Anyone, anywhere, could tap into this energy with a simple grounded rod and a tuned receiver. When wireless is perfectly applied, he wrote, the whole Earth will be converted into a huge brain. To test this, he needed a new instrument. In 1891, he unveiled the Tesla coil, a resonant transformer that could generate millions of volts at high frequencies. Unlike conventional transformers, it used an air core and operated through resonant inductive coupling. It didn't just step up voltage, it created artificial lightning. In public lectures, he lit bulbs wirelessly, passed currents through his body, and made metal objects vibrate from invisible fields. The press called it sorcery. Scientists called it genius. But Tesla called it communication. Between 1891 and 1893, he filed a series of groundbreaking patents that laid the foundation for all wireless technology. U.S. Patent 454,622, 1891. System for transmitting electrical energy through the natural medium. U.S. Patent 462,418, 1891. Method of an apparatus for electrical conversion and distribution. U.S. Patent 645,576 and 649,621, 1897. Systems for transmitting electrical energy through the natural medium using earth resonance. These were not vague ideas. They were complete, engineered systems describing grounded transmitters, elevated terminals, tuned receivers, and the use of 4 circuits, 2 in the transmitter, 2 in the receiver, to ensure secure, non-interfering communication. He called this the art of individualization, a method so precise that static or lightning could not accidentally activate a receiver. It was the birth of frequency-selective communication, the principle behind every radio, Wi-Fi, and cellular network today. But Tesla's vision went further. He didn't just want to send Morse code. He wanted to transmit power, voice, images, and even facsimile wirelessly. In 1893, he demonstrated wireless lighting at the St. Louis World's Fair. In 1898, he stunned the public at Madison Square Garden by unveiling a radio-controlled boat, which he called a telautomaton. The crowd gasped as he steered it with a box of levers, turning its lights on and off, even making it submerge. The U.S. Navy saw military potential. The press called it mind control, but Tesla saw the future of robotics, drones, and remote operation. Yet even as he demonstrated the impossible, a shadow gathered. Others watched. Others copied. And one man in Italy, ambitious, well-connected, and politically savvy, was preparing to claim the sky as his own. In 1895, disaster struck. A fire broke out in Tesla's South Fifth Avenue lab, destroying years of notes, models, and prototypes. He lost everything except his mind. He rebuilt, but the delay proved costly. While Tesla recovered, Guglielmo Marconi, the 21-year-old son of an Italian landowner, began experimenting with wireless telegraphy in his family's attic. He had no formal training in physics. He held no deep theory of Earth resonance. But he had something Tesla lacked: a relentless drive for practical results and powerful patrons. Marconi's early system was crude. He used a spark gap transmitter, a coherer receiver, and a long wire antenna. It worked over short distances across a field, then a hill. But it relied on principles Tesla had already patented: tuned circuits, grounded antennas, and electromagnetic radiation. Marconi filed his first patent in England in 1896, not one single original component. His genius was not invention, but integration and promotion. Tesla, absorbed in his Colorado Springs experiments, paid little attention. He was listening to the Earth's pulse, not the whispers of rivals. But history would not be so kind. The stage was set for a theft not of objects, but of legacy, a heist of the heavens themselves. In 1899, Tesla left for Colorado Springs, where he would build his largest magnifying transmitter and claim to detect signals from Mars. He believed he was on the verge of global communication. What he didn't know was that while he spoke to the stars, someone else was stealing his words. And the world would remember the thief, not the poet. In the spring of 1896, a 22-year-old Italian aristocrat stepped off a train in London with a suitcase full of crude electrical parts and a letter of introduction from his well-connected father. His name was Guglielmo Marconi. He spoke little English. He had no university degree, but he carried a singular obsession: to send messages without wires across impossible distances. What he lacked in scientific depth, he made up for in charm, ambition, and an uncanny instinct for self-promotion. Marconi's journey began in the attic of his family's estate in Pontecchio, near Bologna. There, inspired by Heinrich Hertz's experiments with electromagnetic waves and Oliver Lodge's lectures on syntony, tuned circuits, he built a simple wireless telegraphy system. It used a spark gap transmitter to generate radio waves, a Branly coherer to detect them, and long wires as antennas. By 1895, he had sent signals over a mile across his family's estate, impressive for hobbyists, but hardly revolutionary. Yet Marconi understood something Tesla did not: the world rewards demonstration over theory. While Tesla dreamed of resonant Earth frequencies and global power transmission, Marconi focused on one thing: sending Morse code reliably. He didn't care why it worked, only that it did. And he knew that to succeed, he needed not just science, but patronage. His breakthrough came in 1896, when he demonstrated his system to William Preece, the powerful chief engineer of the British General Post Office. Preece, locked in a rivalry with the British Navy over control of wireless communication, saw Marconi as a weapon. Within weeks, Marconi filed his first British patent, No. 12,039, improvements in transmitting electrical impulses and signals. Crucially, it made no mention of tuning. His early system was a brute force broadcaster. Any receiver within range would pick up the signal. Interference be damned. But Preece didn't care. He arranged public demonstrations. At Toynbee Hall in London, Marconi sent signals through brick walls. On Salisbury Plain, he transmitted over 2 miles. The press hailed him as a new Edison. The British Navy took notice. By 1897, Marconi had founded the Wireless Telegraph and Signal Company, backed by investors like Andrew Carnegie and the Marconi family fortune. Meanwhile, Tesla watched from afar. He had filed his own U.S. patents in 1897 to 645,576 and 649,621, describing fully tuned 4-circuit system for selective communication. His design used 2 resonant circuits in the transmitter and 2 in the receiver, ensuring that only a device tuned to the same frequency would respond. It was elegant, secure, efficient, but Tesla, ever the idealist, was busy raising funds for Wardenclyffe. He believed the world would recognize true innovation when it saw it. He was wrong. Marconi, with British military backing, moved fast. He installed his system on lighthouses, coastal stations, and Royal Navy ships. In 1899, he covered the America's Cup yacht race for the New York Herald, sending updates wirelessly to shore a media sensation. That same year, he crossed the English Channel, sending signals from England to France. The world was captivated. Headlines called him the conqueror of space. But Marconi's technology had a fatal flaw: range. Spark gap transmitters lost power rapidly with distance. To cross the Atlantic over 2,000 miles would require either massive power or a scientific breakthrough. Marconi had neither. What he had was audacity. In 1900, he filed British patent No. 7777, the 4 sevens patent, which finally introduced tuned circuits into his system. The timing was suspicious. Tesla's U.S. patents had been public since 1897. Lodge, Popoviv, and others had published on tuning, but Marconi's patent claimed the invention as his own. The British government granted it without deep scrutiny. National pride outweighed intellectual rigor. Now armed with tuning, Marconi set his sights on the ultimate prize: transatlantic wireless telegraphy. He chose Poldhu, Cornwall, as his transmitting station, a cliffside site where he erected a massive antenna array of 20 masts, 200 feet tall, connected by a web of copper wires. In Newfoundland, he planned to receive the signal at Signal Hill, using a kite-supported antenna 400 feet in the air. The scientific community scoffed. Lord Kelvin declared it impossible. Even Marconi's own engineers doubted it. The curvature of the Earth, atmospheric absorption, and signal dispersion should have made transatlantic transmission unfeasible with 1901 technology. But Marconi pressed on. On December 12, 1901, under gray Newfoundland skies, Marconi and his assistant George Kemp listened through headphones connected to the kite antenna. At noon, they heard it, 3 faint clicks. The letter S in Morse code dash dot dash dot dash dot dot sent from Poldhu. Across the Atlantic, the world erupted. Newspapers called it a miracle. Scientists demanded proof. Skeptics suggested it was atmospheric noise or wishful thinking. Marconi never released full data. But the myth was born. Marconi had conquered the Atlantic. He was the father of radio. What no one mentioned was that his receiving apparatus used a Branly coherer invented by Eduard Branly, AN antenna design inspired by Tesla and Lodge, and tuned circuits described in patents that predated his own. Most damningly, his 4 sevens patent, the key to selective communication, was filed 3 years after Tesla's U.S. patents. Yet none of that mattered. Marconi had done what Tesla refused to do. He made it simple, public, and spectacular. He didn't explain the physics, he sold the dream. And in the race for legacy, dreams often outpace truth. Tesla, still struggling to fund Wardenclyffe, was devastated. He knew Marconi's feat reel, or exaggerated, would steal the spotlight from his own wireless power system. He wrote to friends, "Marconi is a good fellow. Let him continue. He is using 17 of my patents." But silence was not surrender. It was the calm before the storm. For Nikola Tesla, the theft of the sky had just begun, and he would not let it go unanswered. December 12, 1901, Signal Hill, St. John's, Newfoundland. The wind howled off the North Atlantic, slicing through coats and rattling the wooden frame of the kite that floated 400 feet above the cliffs. Below, in a drafty cabin once used by Marconi's team as a makeshift lab, 2 men huddled over a wooden table. Guglielmo Marconi, 27 years old, clean-shaven, eyes burning with ambition. His assistant, George Kemp, a seasoned telegrapher with decades of experience, adjusted the headphones with trembling hands. For 3 days, They had listened. Static. Wind. The groan of the kite's rope. Nothing. Skeptics back in England had laughed. Lord Kelvin had declared transatlantic wireless impossible. Even Marconi's own engineers at Poldhu doubted the signal could curve around the Earth. But Marconi believed. Or perhaps he simply needed to believe. Then, at precisely 12:30 p.m. local time, it came. Faint, fleeting, unmistakable. Dot, dot. The letter S in Morse code. Sent from Poldhu, Cornwall 2,100 miles away. Marconi later wrote, I heard the 3 dots clearly. I felt a wave of emotion I cannot describe. Kemp, more cautious, noted in his diary. Faint signals. Possibly atmospheric interference. But Guglielmo is certain. That moment, whether real, exaggerated, or imagined, would change history. Within hours, Marconi cabled the news to London. The next morning, headlines exploded across the globe. Marconi conquers the Atlantic. Wireless messages sent across the ocean. The end of distance. The world didn't ask for proof. It wanted a hero. And Marconi, handsome, young, backed by the British Empire, was the perfect one. But behind the triumph, cracks began to show. Scientists demanded details. What frequency? What power output? What was the exact time and atmospheric conditions? Marconi's company released only fragments. No oscillograms. No calibrated recordings. Just the word of 2 men in a hut on a stormy cliff. Critics were swift. Professor John Ambrose Fleming Marconi, S. own scientific advisor later, admitted the signal was likely atmospheric noise or harmonic interference from a much closer source. The wavelength Marconi used, 366 meters, should not have propagated beyond the horizon under known physics of the time. The ionosphere's reflective properties, which would later explain long-distance radio, weren't discovered until 1924 by Edward Appleton. Even more damning, the receiving apparatus used a coherer, a glass tube filled with metal filings that clumped together when hit by radio waves. It was notoriously unreliable, prone to false triggers from vibration, static, or even temperature changes. And Marconi's antenna? A silk-covered kite with a wire dangling into the sea, hardly a precision instrument. Yet none of this mattered to the public, nor to investors, nor to newspapers hungry for wonder. The myth was more powerful than the measurement. Marconi, ever the showman, leaned into it. He gave lectures in London, New York, and Rome. He was feted by kings and tycoons. J.P. Morgan, who had recently withdrawn funding from Tesla's Wardenclyffe Tower, now poured money into Marconi's company, seeing wireless telegraphy as a profitable monopoly, not a public utility. For Nikola Tesla, the news was a gut punch. He had been working on his own transatlantic system for years, part of his world wireless system at Wardenclyffe. But while Marconi sought only to send dots and dashes, Tesla dreamed of transmitting power, voice, and global communication. His tower was taller, his science deeper, his vision grander. But he had no press agent, no British Navy, no triumphant cable to the world. Instead, he issued a quiet correction. In a letter to the New York Sun, he wrote, I have no doubt that signals can be transmitted across the Atlantic, but Mr. Marconi is using my oscillators, my tuned circuits, and my fundamental principles. Let him not claim what belongs to the future of science. Few listened. The media had chosen its narrative. The young Italian inventor had done the impossible. The older, foreign, eccentric Tesla was a relic, a dreamer of failed towers. But Tesla knew something Marconi didn't. Science is not decided by headlines. It is decided by patents, by courts, by time. And he would wait. In the months that followed, Marconi's company aggressively patented everything. They sued competitors. They lobbied governments. They built coastal stations from Cape Cod to Cape Town. By 1903, they dominated global wireless telegraphy. despite never publicly proving the 1901 transmission under controlled conditions. Meanwhile, Tesla returned to Wardenclyffe. He tried to revive interest. He gave interviews. He demonstrated wireless lighting in his lab. But the world's attention had shifted. Marconi wasn't just a man anymore. He was a brand, a symbol of progress. And Tesla? He was becoming a ghost. Yet in the silence, he gathered his evidence, his notebooks, his patents, his witnesses. He knew that one day, the truth would surface not in a storm on Signal Hill, but in a courtroom, because the sky wasn't Marconi's to claim. It never was. And the real battle, the battle for legacy, had only just begun. While the world celebrated Marconi as the inventor of radio, Nikola Tesla waged a quieter, more desperate war, not with sparks or signals, but with paper, ink, and the cold logic of intellectual property. He knew that fame was fleeting, but patents were forever. And if he could prove that the foundation of Marconi's system rested on his own inventions, the truth would eventually surface. The battle began long before the transatlantic signal. In 1897, Tesla filed 2 U.S. patents. No 645,576 and no 649,621. That described a complete system for wireless transmission using 4 tuned circuits, 2 in the transmitter, 2 in the receiver. This syntonic or resonant system ensured that only a receiver tuned to the same frequency as the transmitter would respond, a revolutionary concept that made wireless communication secure, efficient, and scalable. He called it the art of individualization, a method so precise that even lightning strikes or atmospheric noise could not accidentally trigger a receiver. Marconi's early system had none of this. His 1896 British patent was a crude, untuned broadcaster. Anyone within range could intercept the signal, and interference was rampant. But everything changed in 1900, when Marconi filed his infamous British patent No. 7777, the 4 sevens patent, which suddenly introduced tuned circuits into his design. The timing was no coincidence. Tesla's U.S. patents had been public for 3 years. Scientific journals had discussed resonance. Even Marconi's own advisors like Oliver Lodge had published on tuning, yet Marconi claimed the idea as his own. Tesla watched in silence as Marconi's company grew into a global monopoly. By 1904, the U.S. Patent Office, under pressure from British diplomatic interests and Marconi's powerful American investors, including J.P. Morgan and Thomas Edison, did the unthinkable. It granted Marconi U.S. patent No. 763,772 for wireless telegraphy, effectively ignoring Tesla's prior claims. It was a devastating blow. Tesla, already struggling to fund Wardenclyffe, now saw his life's work legally erased. But he refused to surrender. In 1909, he began quietly assembling his case. He gathered his notebooks, his lab records, affidavits from engineers who had witnessed his 1893 demonstrations, and copies of his original patent filings. He hired lawyers. He prepared for a legal war. The first major clash came in 1911, when Marconi's American company sued Reginald Fessenden, another radio pioneer, for patent infringement. Fessenden, who had transmitted the first voice signal in 1906, fought back by challenging the validity of Marconi's patents. Tesla, though not a party to the case, submitted a sworn affidavit detailing his 1893 public demonstrations of wireless signaling at the Franklin Institute and at the St. Louis World's Fair years, before Marconi built his first transmitter. The court took notice. In 1915, the legal tide began to turn. The U.S. government, now at war and deeply concerned about Marconi's foreign control over critical communication technology, launched its own investigation. During World War I, the U.S. Navy seized control of all radio stations and refused to pay royalties to Marconi's company. The government even encouraged American firms like General Electric and Westinghouse to develop their own radio system using technologies that traced back to Tesla, Lodge, and Fessenden. Then came the bombshell. In 1915, Nikola Tesla himself sued Guglielmo Marconi in U.S. federal court, demanding recognition as the true inventor of radio and seeking royalties for the use of his patents. The case Tesla v. Marconi became one of the most complex intellectual property battles of the early 20th century. But Tesla was fighting more than a rival. He was fighting time, poverty, and obscurity. While Marconi dined with kings and received honorary degrees, Tesla lived in room 3327 of the New Yorker Hotel, feeding pigeons and surviving on milk. His legal team was underfunded. His health was failing, and the world had already crowned its hero. The press mocked him. Tesla claims Marconi stole radio, read one headline, followed by, "But who listens to a madman?" Even former allies like Westinghouse offered only polite sympathy, not support. Yet in courtrooms and patent offices, the evidence mounted. Engineers testified that Marconi's 1901 receiver used a Branly coherer, invented by Eduard Branly, AN antenna grounded to Earth, a Tesla innovation, and tuned circuits that mirrored Tesla's 1897 designs. Marconi's own early notebooks later revealed showed sketches nearly identical to Tesla's published diagrams. Still, the U.S. Patent Office remained stubborn. In 1917, it upheld Marconi's patent. Tesla appealed. The legal battle dragged on for decades through the Roaring Twenties, the Great Depression, and into the age of global broadcasting. But Tesla never stopped believing. In private letters, he wrote, "The truth does not need to shout. It only needs to wait." And wait he did, because the final verdict would not come in his lifetime. It would come in a courtroom in Washington, D.C. 6 months after his death, and it would change everything. For now, though, the world belonged to Marconi, and Tesla was left with only his silence and his certainty. December 10th, 1909, Stockholm, Sweden. Snow fell softly over the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences as dignitaries, diplomats, and Europe as intellectual elite gathered for the most prestigious night in science, the Nobel Prize ceremony. That year, the world expected drama. For months, rumors had swirled that the physics prize would finally recognize the true inventor of wireless telegraphy, a field that had reshaped global communication in less than a decade. Many believed Nikola Tesla, the visionary behind alternating current and resonant transmission, would at last receive his due. Others whispered the name of Guglielmo Marconi, the charismatic showman whose transatlantic signal had captured the public imagination. But when the announcement came, it was not Tesla who walked forward. It was Marconi alongside Carl Ferdinand Braun, a German physicist who had improved Marconi's spark gap transmitter with a closed-circuit design. The room erupted in applause. Marconi, impeccably dressed, bowed deeply. In his acceptance speech, he thanked his mentors, his investors, and the British Navy, but made no mention of Tesla, Lodge, Popov, or Branly. He spoke of my system, my experiments, my vision. The narrative was complete. Marconi was the sole architect of radio. Back in New York, Nikola Tesla read the news in silence. He was 53 years old, living in a modest apartment near his half-abandoned Wardenclyffe Tower. He had spent the last decade refining his theories of global wireless energy, battling financial ruin, and watching as others claimed the future he had designed. The Nobel snub was not just a personal wound, it was a historical erasure. But the truth was even darker. In the weeks leading up to the announcement, credible reports emerged that the Nobel Committee had originally intended to award the prize jointly to Tesla and Marconi. According to insiders, Tesla's name was on the shortlist, supported by physicists who understood the depth of his contributions to electromagnetic theory and tune circuits. But something changed. Rumors pointed to Thomas Edison, the Wizard of Menlo Park, still locked in rivalry with Tesla from the War of Currents, had become an influential figure in American scientific circles. Edison had invested in Marconi's American operations and publicly praised him as a practical genius. Some historians believe Edison lobbied against Tesla's inclusion, calling him a dreamer unfit for such an honor. Others blame the British scientific establishment, which had heavily backed Marconi, and viewed Tesla, a Serbian immigrant with radical ideas about free energy, as an outsider, even a threat to the commercial control of wireless technology. Then there was the matter of temperament. Tesla refused to self-promote. He had turned down lucrative offers to commercialize his inventions. He spoke of giving energy to the world for free, a notion that horrified industrialists and governments alike. In contrast, Marconi was polished, politically connected, and understood the power of image. Whatever the reason, the result was devastating. The Nobel Prize cemented Marconi's place in history, not as one contributor among many, but as the inventor of radio. Textbooks were rewritten. Museums erected statues. Schools taught children that Marconi invented wireless communication. Tesla, meanwhile, faded further into obscurity. He never publicly complained. In a rare interview, he said only, "The scientists of today think deeply instead of clearly." One must be sane to think clearly, but one can think deeply and be quite insane. It was a veiled critique not of Marconi, but of a world that rewarded spectacle over substance. Yet the injustice burned. In private letters to friends, Tesla wrote, "They give medals to those who take, but the true pioneers walk alone." He continued his work, building high-frequency oscillators, experimenting with particle beams, and dreaming of interplanetary communication. But the wound of 1909 never healed. The irony is profound. Brown, Marconi's co-laureate, had improved Marconi's system by adding tuning, the very principle Tesla had patented in 1897. Brown himself acknowledged Tesla as priority in private correspondence. Yet the Nobel Committee chose to honor the improver of a stolen system, not the originator of the idea. Even more telling, no Nobel Prize has ever been awarded for the invention of radio. The 1909 award was for contributions to the development of wireless telegraphy, a carefully worded phrase that avoided claiming Marconi invented it outright. But the public didn't read the fine print. They saw two men on a stage, holding gold medals, and assumed the matter was settled. For decades, the myth held. Marconi became a global icon. Tesla became a footnote, a mad scientist with wild hair and doomsday rays. But history has a way of correcting its errors, not with fanfare, not with ceremonies, but with documents, courts, and time. And 6 months after Tesla's death, the truth would finally echo from the highest court in the land. Until then, he carried the weight of the stolen sky in silence. Because some victories are not for this life. They are for the next. January 7th, 1943, New York City. In room 3327 of the New Yorker Hotel, Nikola Tesla died alone. He was 86 years old. His room held little. Unpaid bills, a stack of handwritten notes, and a few books on poetry and physics. Outside, the city buzzed with the energy he had helped unleash radio broadcasts. Electric subways, neon signs, all running on the alternating current system he gave to the world. But no headlines marked his passing. No flags flew at half-mast. The man who had dreamed of lighting the earth without wires was buried in silence. Within hours, agents from the U.S. Office of Alien Property seized his belongings. The government, fearing his unpublished research on particle beams and energy weapons might fall into enemy hands during World War II, classified everything. Even Einstein, consulted by the FBI, admitted Tesla's later work was too far ahead for our time. But as the world mourned other losses in the fog of war, A quiet legal battle was reaching its climax in Washington, D.C., a battle Tesla never lived to see, but one that would finally restore his name. It began not with fanfare, but with necessity. In 1942, the U.S. Navy found itself entangled in a patent dispute with the Marconi Wireless Telegraph Company of America. The company was demanding royalties for the use of its radio patents in military equipment money the government refused to pay during wartime. The case, Marconi Wireless Telegraph Co. v. United States, reached the Supreme Court, but the government had a secret weapon, Nikola Tesla's patents. Led by attorneys from the U.S. Department of Justice and backed by engineers from the National Bureau of Standards, the government argued that Marconi's key U.S. patent, No. 763,772, granted in 1904, was invalid because it relied on inventions that predated Marconi's work. They presented a mountain of evidence. Tesla's 1893 public demonstrations of wireless signaling at the Franklin Institute. His 1897 U.S. patents, 645,576 and 649,621, which described a complete four-circuit tuned system. Testimony from scientists who had witnessed Tesla's experiments. Marconi's own early notebooks, which showed no understanding of tuning until after Tesla's patents were published. The case turned on a single question: who first conceived and demonstrated the use of tuned circuits for selective wireless communication? On June 21, 1943, just 5 months after Tesla's death, the Supreme Court issued its ruling. In a unanimous decision, the court declared Marconi's 1904 patent invalid, stating that Tesla's patents anticipated Marconi's work. Justice Harlan F. Stone wrote, "Marconi's reputation as the man who first achieved successful radio transmission is not here in question, but the Patent Office and the courts must look to the record of invention, not to popular acclaim." It was a stunning reversal. The highest court in the land had declared that Nikola Tesla, not Guglielmo Marconi, was the true inventor of the fundamental technology behind radio. But there was no press conference, no headlines. The ruling was buried in legal journals, overshadowed by the war. Marconi, who had died in 1937, was already enshrined in history textbooks. Tesla remained a ghost. Why did the court rule when it did? Historians debate the motives. Some say it was purely legal. Marconi's patent was indeed built on prior art. Others believe the U.S. government wanted to void Marconi's royalties without paying compensation, and Tesla's posthumous status made him a convenient, non-litigious champion. Either way, the truth had surfaced. For those who knew Tesla, the ruling was bittersweet. His old friend Kenneth Swezey said, "He would have smiled, then gone back to his work. He never cared for prizes, only for truth." But the world had already chosen its hero. Schools still taught that Marconi invented radio. Museums still displayed his equipment as the first. The Nobel Prize was never revoked, and the public memory remained unchanged. Yet in the halls of science, the record was clear. Engineers designing radar, television, and early wireless networks studied Tesla's patents. The four-circuit resonance system became the bedrock of all modern communication. Every time a signal is tuned to a frequency on your phone, your Wi-Fi, your car radio, you are using Tesla's language. The tragedy is not that Tesla was forgotten. It's that he was remembered too late. He died poor, alone, and uncredited. But his ideas outlived empires. And in the end, that was always enough for him, because Nikola Tesla never sought a monument. He built a frequency, and frequencies never die. The sky was never Marconi's to claim. It belonged to the waves, and the waves spoke Tesla's name. Today, over 80 years after his death, Nikola Tesla's vindication is not found in court records or history books. It is woven into the fabric of daily life. Every time you unlock your car with a key fob, stream music over Bluetooth, make a call on your smartphone, or connect to Wi-Fi. You are using technology built on the four-circuit resonance system he patented in 1897. Principle of tuned frequencies. His art of individualization is the invisible architecture of the wireless age. Marconi may have sent the first publicized signal, but Tesla built the language it spoke. Yet for decades, the myth endured. Textbooks credited Marconi as the inventor of radio. The Nobel Prize stood unchallenged. Even the IEEE, the world's largest technical professional organization, named its radio award after Marconi, not Tesla, until public pressure led to a joint naming in 2019. The theft of the sky was complete, not by force, but by narrative. But history has a slow, patient justice. In 1960, the scientific community honored Tesla in the most enduring way possible. They named the SI unit of magnetic flux density the Tesla term used daily in physics, engineering, and medicine, from MRI machines to particle accelerators. No one measures magnetic fields in Marconi's. In 1975, Tesla was inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame, not for a sea power, but specifically for his radio patents. The citation read, "For his pioneering work in the development of radio communication." In 2013, a grassroots campaign raised over $1.3 million to save Wardenclyffe Tower, the site of Tesla, as unfinished dream from demolition. Today, it is the Tesla Science Center, a museum and innovation lab where children build coils, engineers test wireless power, and visitors stand beneath a restored model of the tower that never sang. It is not a monument to failure. It is a promise kept. And in 2018, the U.S. Congress passed a resolution officially recognizing Nikola Tesla as the true inventor of radio, citing the 1943 Supreme Court decision and his foundational patents. The resolution, though symbolic, was a quiet correction of a century-old error. Yet the most profound tribute is not official, it is ordinary. It's in the hum of a wireless charger on your nightstand using resonant inductive coupling, a phenomenon Tesla demonstrated with glowing bulbs in the 1890s. It is in the emergency alert that flashes on your phone during a storm delivered via tuned broadcast frequencies. It's in the drone that hovers over a disaster zone, controlled remotely, just like Tesla's Telautomaton boat in 1898. Even Marconi's legacy now rests on Tesla's shoulders. Modern historians acknowledge that while Marconi was a brilliant entrepreneur and engineer, his early system lacked the critical element of selective tuning, the very feature that made wireless communication practical. Without Tesla's patents, Marconi's transatlantic signal would have been lost in noise, interference, and chaos. Guglielmo Marconi was not a thief in the criminal sense. He was a man of his time-driven, ambitious, and skilled at turning science into spectacle. But he benefited from a world that favored the practical over the prophetic, the connected over the solitary, the Italian aristocrat over the Serbian immigrant. Tesla, by contrast, refused to play the game. He gave his AC patents to Westinghouse to ensure the spread of alternating current. He refused to patent his wireless lighting, saying it should belong to all. He dreamed of free global energy, a vision that terrified financiers like J.P. Morgan, who famously asked, "Where do I put the meter?" That question reveals the core of the conflict. Marconi built a business. Tesla built a civilization. One sought control. The other sought connection. And in the end, connection outlasts control. Today, as we live in a world saturated with invisible signals, 5G towers, satellite constellations, IoT devices, we are living inside Tesla's dream. He did not just invent radio. He imagined a nervous system for the planet, where information and energy flow freely, instantly, universally. His name is now everywhere, on electric cars, on university labs, on street signs, on YouTube documentaries made by those who refuse to let truth fade. Elon Musk named his company Tesla not as a gimmick, but as a declaration. The future belongs to those who reimagine energy. And still, his bones rest in a quiet grave in New York. His tower stands in ruins, then reborn. His notebooks glow faintly in lead boxes. But his frequency? It never stopped broadcasting. So the next time your phone lights up with a message from across the world, or your car unlocks with a whisper of radio waves, or a storm rolls in with thunder that sounds like a voice, pause, look up, and remember, the sky was never stolen. It was only waiting for us to learn its language. And Nikola Tesla spoke it first.